Thank you, Eddie. My talk title this morning is Listening to Spirit. Listening to Spirit. It's what we've come to do. It's what we're in the physical to do, to birth a spiritual idea into the material world. That's what you are here to do, to know that we have a partner for good, supporting the best ideas for ourselves, allowing ourselves to become a channel of Spirit's ideas for a life of love, of joy, by means of us and through us, that we made it possible. Yes, thank you. Already amen in the crowd. And it doesn't require that we become all holy or saintly. It doesn't require that we become anything perfect. We can do it right where we are. But it requires to us to raise our vibration to a level of love and joy. If we're fearful, if we're angry, if we're resentful, how can we connect with a vibration or source of love? How would that work? And even if we were to connect with that source of love, even if it spoke loving words to us, we would still interpret it as harsh rebukes. We wouldn't be able to understand it. Now, I've got lovely cousins, and every once in a while, they will send me YouTube videos of these people running around proclaiming to be prophets. And they wonder why I don't go to family reunions, and it's a very interesting phenomenon that's happening right now on a social level. The evangelical community is, like all denominations in spirituality right now, is losing memberships. But there are these people who are online who are proclaiming to be prophets, and their followers are soaring. They're getting a lot of big following. And a lot of what they're talking about is political. Strange to think that Spirit would want to intervene in our politics, an area where I don't know how much good you can do in the world. Now, I don't know from prophets. I don't really know that much about them, but I do think if you're around somebody who self-declares that they're a prophet, it might be a good time to watch your wallet. And I take the advice from a character in one of my favorite plays. I'm sure many of you haven't heard of it. It's called Greater Tuna, and it's about Tuna, Texas. And one of the characters in there, she becomes kind of infamous when she snatches a toupee off of a traveling tent revival preacher. And she said, well, he claimed to heal the lame. He couldn't even grow a head of hair. So I'm like Ashley Wilkes and Gone with the Wind. Scarlett was telling him that she was going to open up a business, and he told her, he says, you ought to name it butchering this. In Latin, buyer beware. That's what he told her he should name it. So buyer beware. Now, here is a big rule for you. If out of the mouth of somebody who's saying they're a prophet, or really anybody else, comes something that's not loving and supportive, it's not of God. It's of human ego. It's not of Spirit. If it's a message that makes you fearful, distrustful, or confused, it's not of Spirit. God is not an author of confusion. God is not an author of confusion. If it empowers you, it encourages you, then it's the voice of the universe, and say yes to it and go with it. But you've got to make that decision for yourself. You're the one who has to make that decision. Spirit will never give us less power. It's always wanting to give us more authority over our lives, because that's ultimately what we're here to do, is to take authority over our lives. Now, as many of you know, I'm going through the textbook chapter by chapter this year. I'm on chapter 20, and this chapter is what the mystics have taught, Dr. Ernest Holmes. And in this chapter, he points out that in history, we have people who have come along and were able to proclaim a truth greater than what was available for them to know. In other words, they tapped into universal mind, and that spirit alone had been their teacher. They tapped into universal intelligence. So Jesus, Buddha, Dr. Holmes, Gandhi, Dr. King, they all drew from this cosmic consciousness. And I think it's interesting. One of the things that I find interesting in history is there are people who try to say that Jesus might have met or was influenced by the Buddhist teachings, and maybe he traveled to India. And perhaps he did. But I think it's also easy to understand he was operating at a level of intelligence, the same as Buddha was doing. And so he was bringing down the same similar ideas. It's a historical fact, and I find this fascinating, that often scientific breakthroughs or inventions will happen in different places around the world, but often very close to the same time. The same breakthroughs happening. It's people operating at that same vibrational level. Now, here's a wonderful idea of our teaching, and that is that what anyone has done, we can do. If anybody has done it, you can do. Even us, particularly us. All of us, because after all the great teachers, Moses, Jesus, they all were reluctant to step into their power. They all had to be encouraged to step into their powers. So if they did it, we can do it, because Spirit might have a better idea for you this morning. And perhaps it's you who are waiting to step up and bring a huge blessing to life by means of you, through you. Dr. Holmes says the mystics are always the artists around us, and he pointed to poets. I like to think of Dr. Holmes primarily as a poet. I think that's really what he was best at. A good friend of mine, he said, all of spirituality first shows up in the world as poetry, and then the bureaucrats get a hold of it and turn it into a religion. Dr. Holmes says all philosophers were mystics, all great music, all great artists, all of those have come from people who have made a connection with Spirit. Years ago, I went to a Dolly Parton concert. About this time of the year, it was so hot in Atlanta. And she got up and sang and entertained for 2.5 hours. And only her. And the thing that I loved about her is she would take her songs, many of them that were love songs, and tweak them just a little bit. And there was always a spiritual element to them. I thought that was really wonderful. Dr. Holmes says that the mystics reveal things so that we can understand that we are not just ships passing in the night. In other words, mystics reveal an intelligence behind our lives, that there are things in our life that just can't simply be understood on the face of it. There's an intelligence behind things. I love reading history, and Winston Churchill is one of my favorite characters. And there's a true story about him that when he was probably in middle school, what we would call equivalent of middle school, he had a dream that disturbed him greatly. He wrote about it, he told friends about it, and he shared it with the adults in his life at the time. So people remembered this dream. And what this dream was that he was going to be an adult. He would be the leader of Great Britain. He would be in London, and bombs were being rained down upon London. He had this dream probably before the turn of the century. And yet in the 40s, he was to live through that experience. Even though at the time he had the dream, that idea of bombs coming to a city was probably just in, fiction. No one really thought of it as a serious idea, but he had that foretelling of it. He had tapped into a universal intelligence. Most of our knowing comes from a direct download of God in our lives. And we must learn what we learn of God, we must learn through ourselves. if we are constantly reminding ourselves how miserable life can be, then how can we learn of that which is all loving? There is a way for us to know about spirit, the goodness of it. And when we do, when we have that spirit experience, when we know we're a part of something wonderful and joyful and loving, it gives us a calm, it gives us a peace, it gets us to a place that we no longer have to argue with people about religion. You know, when I was in my early adulthood, I was what I self-identify as a loudmouth atheist. And I loved nothing more than to get in arguments with people about religion. But as I've come into this teaching, I've given that up. I don't have to do that anymore. I'm happy to listen to your ideas about spirituality. And if it works for you, then what business of it is mine? If it's working for you, then God love you. Go on about your way. Now, if you have questions, I'll answer your questions, but I don't have any need to defend or to argue. I told this story a couple of years ago, and I'll share it again. It happened about this time of year, really hot time in St. Augustine. It was Monday, my day off. I was tooling around the house. There was a knock at the door, and I looked out, and there were two elderly ladies and a little 9-year-old girl. And I know this is not true. I know this is a trick of my imagination, but I swear they looked like the workers off of Downton Abbey. They looked like they were dressed in long wool outfits, wool hats on. They looked like they were melting in the July heat and humidity. Well, I treat the heat and humidity like people in the Antarctic treat the cold. And I opened the door up and I just kind of ordered them in from the heat. Let's get in here. And I gave them some water because I knew the other stuff I had on hand, they probably wouldn't want to drink. So they're sitting there, they're cooling off, they have the water. And of course, they want to start talking to me. And I shared with them, no, I'm happy with what I believe. That's okay. Then they tried to sell me magazines. And no, I don't read the magazines I get. That's okay. So finally, the grandmother thought she had to have another throw at it. And she said, well, can we do a prayer for you? I was sure. I'm happy to have a prayer. And I listed a couple of things that I wanted prayer for. Don't think she was expecting that. And then I said, I'll hear your prayer, but I want to do a prayer for you too. That she wasn't expecting. So she did her prayer, and then I did my prayer. And what was my prayer? That there's shade that they can walk in. That there's people that they get to who are friendly and nice to them, and then when it gets too hot, they have the intelligence to know to go home. So I finished up my prayer. They took the bottles of waters. I haven't seen them again. They haven't come back. But it's okay. I was happy to have their prayer. I hope they were happy to have mine. Spirit is forever revealing its truth to us when we will lift our eyes to a better knowing, a better inspiration. And what are better inspirations? To bring more love, to bring more joy, to bring more goodness to the world by means of us. And that's what we're doing. You know, this past week, I had an inspiration because I was talking to my friend who helps us with the school program. And so my inspiration was that I know that these kids who are going to these schools have trouble getting clothes. She tells me that often they don't really have anything new all year long. And I know how school clothes can be a real heavy expense for these families. So my thought was that we would, as we do at Christmas time, we would get names and sizes and stuff, and we would buy the kids school clothes. I thought it was a really great idea. But I was talking to my contact, and she reminded me, she said, well, you know, it is a good idea. She said, but we don't know the kids that are coming back. It's not a regular school. Because our families are living so on the edge. We don't know who will be back this school year, who we will get new, who's in trouble, and who needs help. So it's a good idea, but maybe it's something that we have to do later. But here's the thing. that wasn't an idea that worked. But if as long as I don't identify myself with that idea, say, okay, this is just a process where we're going to move on to something better, then something better will come. Something good will come. It reminded me of a friend. I thought about him this week, a friend of mine. When I first met him over 30 years ago, he was living in Atlanta. But he desperately wanted to get back to Natchez, Mississippi. That was his hometown. All his family was in Natchez. And at the time he had an idea, he would sell personalized bricks. His family ran one of the big historic homes there in Natchez. And he would sell these personalized bricks to make a garden path for the gardens there. And he thought this would be a big seller to the tourists that came through. Well, guess what? Nobody bought a brick. Nobody bought bricks. But about 6 months later, that idea led him to another idea. And that idea was he would create these individual kits to make garden stones. You'd have a little bag of cement, a little form, a little stencil. You could make designs in the stone. That idea sold like hotcakes. They couldn't keep them on the shelf. He made tons of money. But he first had to have the idea of the brick. If we don't identify with a bad idea, if we don't say, oh, that's me again going down the wrong road. If we see it not as a roadblock, but as a stepping stone, Spirit will get us to a greater place, a better knowing. Dr. Holmes says we're daily guided by divine intelligence into paths of peace and health and prosperity, where the soul recognizes its source and meets in joyful union in complete at-one-ment. At-one-ment. The unity of good is a revelation of the greatest importance, for it teaches us that we are one with Spirit, the parenthood of Spirit, the actual sisterhood and brotherhood of humanity, and it will be made apparent on earth to the degree that we realize it for ourselves. We've been waiting on God. God's waiting on us to know something better. And it happens through the little nooks and crannies and weirdness of our personalities. See, we think we've got to give those up. We don't need to give them up. Spirit can use those things to reveal a greater knowing. Spirit will use all your little weirdness of your personality to bring the fullness of itself to life. And that's what we're doing. We're all on the pathway of experiencing self-discovery, and we're all going to get there. Dr. Holmes says, no, not one of us will be missing. Through our best ideas, that's how we're going to get there. The most loving and kind ones. You know, as I said last week, when you have a really loving and kind idea, say namaste to it. The God in me recognizes the God in you. And if there's God in both of us, then something good has got to happen. Something joyful has got to happen. Evolution, Dr. Holmes says, is the awakening of the soul to recognizing the unity within. Spirit itself is using us, calling us forth to know something better. What was that song in The Color Purple? Maybe God is trying to tell you something. Well, maybe Spirit is trying to tell you something this morning, that we don't have to live downcast, that we don't have to live disturbed, that we don't have to be worried by the worries of the world, that we've come to life to declare and to decree something good and powerful for ourselves and each other. Through us flows all the creative energy of the universe. Here, now, we have something wonderful and powerful to know and to do, that we are the very glory of God made manifest. Through our hearts, our minds, and our souls, we're bringing about a more compassionate world, a more loving one, a more kind one. It's within every one of us, and now's the time to bring about a bright, shining morning star of love that you have come to be. God knows the truth in you. I know the truth in you. Stand up this morning and be that truth. Go out of here not afraid. Go out of here go out of here inspired. Go out of here encouraged, knowing that you've got the power and goodness and glory of God with you to make manifest in your life. It's the truth in your life this morning. It's the truth in mine, and so it is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Every morning, the light keeps getting brighter as I wake up to the truth. And every day, I'm feeling so much lighter, and the world seems fresh and new. What I was taught and the way that I thought stopped serving me long ago. Now I'm learning to trust in the God of all of us. Each day I start anew, and so I'm walking away from the thinking that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the thinking that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to such sadness. Today is the day I walk away. Every day I walk away. Every morning brings a new beginning. By grace, another day to be. And I awaken to the sun upon me shining, lighting the way for me to see. Oh, things that I sought and the way that I thought stopped serving me long ago. Now I'm learning to trust in the God of all of us. Of yesterday I'm letting go. I'm walking away from the thinking that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to confusion. Today is the day I walk away. Oh, I'm walking away from the less than that held me for so long. Today is the day I walk away. I'm walking away from the path that led me to such sadness. Today is the day. Today is the day. Today is the day I walk away. Thank you.